On my 29th birthday, my parents withdrew $2.6 million that I had saved over a decade. But what they didn't know was, they had just triggered my trap. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Maren Vale, I'm 29, and I live in Portland. I work as an accountant, numbers, planning, saving. That's always been my thing. I started earning money at 18, working late shifts, studying hard, building a future that I thought would make my parents proud. I believed in one rule my parents drilled into me since I was little: family above all. My parents, Clara and Decker Vale, always told me they were proud of me. But behind their smiles, I could feel something darker: jealousy, resentment, maybe even greed. They were never good with money. Every time I visited home, there was some new problem: a bill that needed paying, a loan they couldn't cover. And every time I helped. Because that's what family does, right? Over the years, I worked harder. I saved every extra dollar. My job paid well, and I lived small. No fancy apartment, no wild spending. Just me, my cat, and my bank account. By the time I turned 29, I had over $2.6 million saved. My safety, my future. That morning, I woke up early. My phone buzzed with birthday messages from coworkers and old friends. Then I saw a notification from my bank. Something felt off. I opened the app, typed in my password, and froze. The balance read $0. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I logged out, logged back in, checked again. Same number. 0. Every cent gone. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transaction history. Multiple withdrawals, large ones, transferred out the night before. The sender's name burned into my screen: Clara Vale. My mother. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 10 years of work, gone in hours. They didn't even call. They didn't ask. They just took it. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of my apartment's heater, and something inside me went still. No anger, no panic, just quiet. Then I smiled, because the truth was, that account wasn't what they thought it was. It wasn't my real savings. It was a decoy, a trap I'd set years ago when I started noticing how my parents looked at my success like it was their property. The real money, my true savings, was safe, hidden far away in different places they'd never find. What they had taken wasn't my future. It was bait, and they had fallen right into it. I put my phone down and whispered, "Happy birthday, Mary." They thought they had beaten me, taken everything I owned. But that day, my parents didn't just steal from me, they exposed who they really were. And now, it was my turn to show them who I had become. Because if they wanted to play games with money, I was the one who wrote the rules. I grew up in a small town tucked between Oregon's damp hills and gray skies, in a house that always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and overdue bills. My parents, Clara and Decker, were experts at pretending everything was fine. Every time the lights flickered because the power bill wasn't paid, my father would sigh and say, "Bad luck again." That was his phrase for everything: missed payments, lost jobs, even his own mistakes. Money was a ghost in our home. You could feel it missing, haunting every dinner conversation. My mother clipped coupons like it was a religion, but she never cut her own spending. She'd buy little luxuries to keep morale up, as she put it. My father called it survival. I called it selfish. When I was 12, I got my first babysitting job. I remember handing my mother the cash proudly, thinking I was helping. She smiled, hugged me tight, and the money disappeared into her purse. A week later, she said she'd used it for groceries. But when I opened the pantry, I found only instant noodles and bills tucked into drawers. That was the first time I realized my earnings weren't mine. By the time I was 16, I was working weekends at a local diner. My parents always said, "We'll pay you back when things get better." They never did. My college scholarships, every cent, went toward keeping their credit afloat. Whenever I tried to say no, my mother's eyes would fill with tears. My father would lean back in his chair, quiet for a moment, before saying softly, "Family helps family, right?" That line crushed me every time. It wasn't a question. It was an order wrapped in guilt. My brother Nolan saw it sooner than I did. He was 3 years older, sharper, less willing to play along. When he turned 18, he packed his truck and drove off without a word. For years, we barely heard from him. My parents said he was ungrateful. Deep down, I knew he was free. I stayed. Someone had to keep things together, or at least that's what I told myself. I became the peacekeeper, the bridge between their chaos and the world outside. I paid their bills, took their calls, covered their lies when neighbors asked how things were going. It felt easier to fix things than to fight. Looking back, I see how carefully they built the cage around me. They used affection like a leash, tightening it whenever I tried to pull away. My mother would say, "You're our good girl, Maren. You never abandon family." And I'd nod, believing it meant love. But it wasn't love. It was control dressed up as care, debt disguised as duty. Even as a child, part of me knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how deep it went, or how much it would cost me later. I thought being loyal made me good. I didn't realize it only made me useful. When I turned 24, life finally started to feel stable. I'd landed a position at a firm in downtown Portland, a job that made every sleepless night of studying worth it. My parents were thrilled at first, calling me their little success story. But it didn't take long before the questions began. "Sweetheart, you must be making good money now," my mother said one evening on the phone. "Maybe you could help us plan a few things? Your dad's not so good with numbers." A week later, they invited me over for dinner. Between forced laughter and burnt chicken, my father slid a folder across the table. "We thought maybe you could be our financial advisor," he said, trying to sound casual. "You're the expert now." The request wasn't really a request. I could feel the same old pressure beneath their smiles. That night, driving home, the idea came to me, sharp and cold. If they wanted me to manage the family's money, I would. But this time on my terms. I opened a new account, one under my name with theirs added for future investment purposes. I told them it was where I'd save for all of us, a family fund, to secure the years ahead. They loved it. They called it our nest egg. In truth, it was nothing but a decoy. My real earnings never touched that account. My true savings lived in quiet corners of financial systems they would never understand. Trusts, bonds, diversified portfolios, all protected under separate entities. The decoy account, though, became my stage. I made small, deliberate deposits. Enough to make it believable, not enough to risk anything. Each month I'd mention it casually. "It's growing fast. One day, this will make sure none of us worry again." My parents' eyes would light up every time. My mother would squeeze my hand, murmuring about how proud she was. My father would nod, pretending not to care, but I could see it, the hunger behind his calm face. They began asking about numbers, curious but cautious. "Just wondering how much we have in there now," my dad would say, pretending it was about planning. I'd smile and give vague answers. Enough. More every month. The more I fed their curiosity, the more it consumed them. I watched how greed transformed them slowly, how conversations turned from family dinners to whispered talks about investments, about when things finally pay off. Sometimes I'd catch my mother looking at me with a strange mix of admiration and envy, like she couldn't decide whether to thank me or resent me. My father grew quieter, calculating. The air around them felt heavier every visit, as if that account had become a secret altar they prayed to. They thought they were getting closer to my success. They didn't realize they were walking straight into the web I had built, thread by thread, smile by smile. Every transfer, every promise, every someday drew them deeper, and I never stopped feeding it. The sky was pale and heavy with rain when I pulled into my parents' driveway. Turning 29 was supposed to feel like a milestone, but that day felt hollow before it even began. My mother greeted me at the door with a too-wide smile, arms stretched for a hug that felt rehearsed. My father stood behind her, quiet, his expression stiff and unreadable. The house smelled the same, old furniture, lemon cleaner, and the faint trace of cigarettes he claimed he'd quit. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice light but strained. "We made your favorite, roast chicken." Dinner was quiet. My parents exchanged looks when they thought I wasn't watching. I filled the silence with small talk about work, pretending not to notice my father's tapping fingers against the table or my mother's forced laughter. Every moment stretched too long. After dessert, my mother handed me a small box with a card tucked beneath the ribbon. Inside was a gold necklace, something I knew they couldn't afford. "It's just a token," she said. "We wanted to show how proud we are." I thanked them, smiled, and hugged her back, pretending to believe it. When I finally went to bed in my old room, the house felt unnaturally still. I left my phone on the nightstand, the faint glow of the banking app still open. Sometime after midnight, I heard faint movement, the creak of the hallway floorboards, the quiet click of a door shutting. I didn't move. I didn't need to. I already knew what was happening. By morning, the air felt different. The kitchen was empty, breakfast untouched, coffee cold in the pot. My parents were gone. On the counter sat a folded note in my mother's handwriting. I opened it slowly. "We did this for the family. You'll understand someday." I stared at the words until they blurred. The same handwriting that once signed permission slips and birthday cards now confessed a theft worth millions. I walked back to my old room, sat on the edge of the bed, and read the note again. My pulse was steady, my breath even. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes when something you've been waiting for finally arrived. "Perfect," I whispered. The word hung in the quiet room like a secret I'd been keeping for years. I folded the note neatly, slid it into my bag, and took one last look around the house. The framed family photo by the stairs stared back at me, 3 smiling faces frozen in false harmony. I turned it face down. Outside, the rain had stopped. I unlocked my car, started the engine, and didn't look back. As I merged onto the highway toward Portland, the phone in my pocket buzzed with another alert from the bank. I ignored it. Instead, I pressed the hands-free button and spoke clearly into the quiet cabin. "Call Eleanor Reeves," I said. My attorney's name echoed through the speaker. It was time to begin. Eleanor answered on the first ring. Her tone was sharp, all business, just like I needed. I explained everything in short, steady sentences, the missing money, the note, the joint account. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Marin, that wasn't just a shared account. That was a conditional trust. You're the sole trustee. Any withdrawal without your written consent is theft. Felony theft." The word hung in the air. Felony. My parents hadn't just crossed a line. They'd stepped into a legal pit they couldn't climb out of. Eleanor moved fast. Within hours, she filed reports, secured documentation, and froze all related activity. She told me not to contact them, but I knew they would reach out first. And they did. The first call came that evening. My mother's voice cracked through the phone before I even said hello. "Marin, honey, please don't be angry. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed a little time to catch up on bills." Her tone was soaked in panic, soft and pleading. The same tone she used when she wanted me to clean up their messes as a kid. I put her on speaker, opened my recording app, and said calmly, "Tell me what happened." She cried harder, her words tumbling over each other. "Your father said it would be fine. We thought you'd understand. It's all for the family." When she hung up, my hands didn't shake. I saved the file, labeled it neatly, call_Clara_1. The next day, my father called. No apologies, no tears, just his usual steady voice, heavy with guilt disguised as pride. "You're making too big a deal out of this. We raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. You owe us this, Marin." I pressed the phone to my ear and let a few seconds of silence stretch out before I answered. "You'll get your time," I said evenly. He didn't understand what I meant, but Eleanor did. Over the next week, I collected everything. Every voicemail, every message. My mother sent long texts about how families shouldn't fight, how she missed me. My father's messages were shorter, colder. "You're not really going through with it." Each one went into a folder. Evidence. At night, my apartment was filled with the low hum of the printer spitting out documents, statements, screenshots, recordings, every trace of their betrayal laid out in black and white. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore, just focused. Eleanor and I met in her office the following morning. She slid a stack of papers across the desk. "Once we move forward, there's no undoing this," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. As I left, the city lights flickered against the rain-streaked glass of her building. The streets outside looked clean, orderly, predictable. Everything my childhood wasn't. They had always told me that family comes before everything. Now, I was about to show them what came after. The stage was set. The confrontation was next. The restaurant sat tucked away on a quiet corner of downtown, the kind of place with dim lights, soft jazz, and linen napkins folded like origami. I'd chosen it carefully, neutral ground, quiet enough for every word to be heard clearly on the recorder hidden in my bag. I called my parents that morning, my voice smooth and calm. "I think we should talk," I told them, "about how to fix this." They arrived early, sitting together in a corner booth. My mother's smile was stretched too wide, her lipstick smudged at the corners. My father rose when he saw me, extending a hand like we were strangers meeting for business. "Good to see you, kiddo," he said. I slid into the seat across from them, the faint sound of the recorder clicking on under the table. "Thanks for coming," I said softly. For a while, no one spoke. The waiter came, took our drink orders, left. My mother broke the silence first. "We were so worried," she said. "This whole thing got out of hand. We thought you'd understand." I nodded, keeping my tone even. "Help me understand then," I said. "Tell me what happened. Start from the beginning." My father glanced at her, then back at me. "We didn't plan it like some crime," he began. "We just needed the money for a bit. We thought maybe you'd let it go." "You thought I wouldn't notice?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. My mother leaned forward, her voice trembling. "We did it for you too, you know. We wanted to invest in something that could help all of us later." I tilted my head, watching her closely. "So you knew it was wrong, but you did it anyway?" Her hands trembled. My father sighed heavily, rubbing his temple. "It wasn't wrong," he muttered. "It's family money. You wouldn't have any of it without us." I let the silence stretch again, long enough for the tension to hum in the air. "So you both agreed," I said quietly. "You knew what you were doing when you took it." My father's jaw clenched. "You're not seriously thinking about getting lawyers involved, are you? You'd never take us to court. You'd never do that to your own parents." I looked up slowly, meeting his eyes. The candles between us flickered, their light bending across the glasses of water. "You're right," I said evenly. "I wouldn't." My mother exhaled in relief, reaching across the table to touch my hand. But before her fingers reached mine, I finished the sentence. "But the law will." Her hand froze midair. My father's face went pale, his lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came out. The recorder blinked red under the table, silent and steady. I took a slow sip of water, letting the weight of my words settle. No shouting, no tears, no chaos. Just the truth, recorded, sealed, and waiting for its moment. When the check arrived, none of us touched it. A week later, the storm I'd built finally broke. The subpoenas went out on Monday morning, delivered straight to their doorstep. Eleanor handled everything quietly, efficiently, with the precision of someone who'd seen too many families tear themselves apart over. By Tuesday, their property was under review. By Wednesday, their accounts were frozen. I didn't have to imagine their faces when it happened. I could almost see them. My father pacing in the living room, trying to make sense of the paperwork. My mother crying into her hands, repeating the same phrase over and over. This can't be real. It was real, and it was only the beginning. That Friday night, I was home, sitting in the dark with a cup of tea cooling beside me. The city outside my window was quiet, only the low hum of cars in the distance. Then came the knock. 3 sharp bangs, then a pause. Then another round, harder this time. "Marin!" My mother's voice cracked through the hallway. "Please open the door. We need to talk." They took everything. Our accounts, the house, everything. Her words echoed against the thin apartment walls. I didn't move. The phone in my hand was already recording, screen dimmed. She kept talking, her voice breaking between sobs. "We didn't know. We didn't think they'd take it this far. Your father's losing his mind, Marin. Please, baby, just open the door." The sound of her fist hitting the wood came again and again. My throat tightened. My eyes stung, but I stayed still. Inside, the air felt thick, heavy with memories. Her laughter from years ago, the smell of her cooking, the way she used to brush my hair before school. All of it tangled with this moment, raw and ugly. I wanted to open the door. I wanted to tell her everything, the account, the trap, the lies I had uncovered, but I didn't. Instead, I pressed my back against the wall beside the door and closed my eyes. The recording light blinked softly in my palm. "Please, Marin," she cried again. "We're still your parents. You can't do this to us." Her words sliced through me, sharper than I expected. But there was no going back. They had written this ending themselves. Her voice grew quieter, trembling. "You're all we have left." I swallowed hard, forcing my breathing to stay even. My reflection in the dark window looked calm, almost detached. But inside, everything hurt. The knocking slowed, then stopped. A few seconds of silence, then the faint sound of her footsteps retreating down the hall. I waited until I couldn't hear her anymore. Only then did I whisper into the quiet room, so softly it was almost a breath. "You taught me what loyalty means." The recorder caught it, the last piece of proof I needed, and maybe the only confession I'd ever made. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and old coffee, the kind of sterile air that makes every sound sharper. Rows of wooden benches filled the room, lined with faces Marin hadn't seen in years. Neighbors from her childhood street, old family friends from church, even a few distant relatives who had come out of curiosity. Word had spread quickly. The Vale family, once so proud of their unity, was about to be dissected in public. Marin sat beside Eleanor at the plaintiff's table, posture straight, expression steady. Across from her, Clara clutched a tissue in trembling hand. Decker sat stiffly beside his lawyer, face drawn tight, jaw set in a defiant line. When the proceedings began, their attorney wasted no time twisting the story. "This is a misunderstanding between family members," he said smoothly. "My clients never intended harm. They merely acted on the belief that the funds were shared, as they had always been." Marin kept her gaze fixed forward. Eleanor rose without haste, her tone calm but cutting. "Your Honor, intent doesn't erase theft. My client's parents signed documents acknowledging the account's conditional trust structure. They acted knowingly." The defense lawyer tried again, leaning into his performance. "We're talking about a daughter turning on her own parents. Vindictive, emotional, perhaps unable to separate resentment from reality." Eleanor's only response was to press a button on the small speaker sitting on the desk. The first recording began to play. Clara's voice filled the room, broken, pleading, unmistakable. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed time to pay bills." The second recording followed, Decker's words calm and cold. "You owe us this, Marin." Murmurs rippled through the benches. Marin didn't turn to look, but she could feel the weight of every whisper. Years of gossip and judgment now fell away, replaced by something else, silence. The defense attorney tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. "Enough," he said firmly. He shuffled through the documents, expression unreadable. After a long pause, he looked directly at Decker and Clara. "You both knowingly violated a legal agreement. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is theft, plain and simple." Clara's breath hitched. Decker's face lost its color. "The court orders full restitution to Ms. Vale," the judge continued. "Property seizure of the defendant's home and all connected assets until repayment is complete. Additionally, due to ongoing harassment, a restraining order will be issued effective immediately." The gavel struck once, the sound echoing like a closing door. For a moment, no one moved. Then Clara swayed in her chair, her hand flying to her chest. The tissue fell to the floor as her body went limp. Gasps filled the courtroom as two clerks rushed forward. Decker just sat there, staring at nothing, his expression hollow. Marin rose quietly. She gathered her documents, her hands steady, her face unreadable. Without a word, she turned and walked toward the exit. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor, each step echoing through the hallway long after the courtroom fell silent. The house stood quiet under a gray sky, its windows clouded with dust, the front yard overgrown and wild. The for sale sign leaned sideways in the dirt, half buried, as if even the earth was tired of holding it up. Marin stepped out of her car and stared at the place that had shaped every wound she carried. The lockbox clicked open easily. Eleanor had arranged access before the bank cleared possession. Inside, the air was heavy with stillness. No furniture, no pictures, just outlines on the walls where frames once hung. The scent of stale air mixed with faint traces of lemon cleaner and smoke. Every footstep echoed. She started in the kitchen. The same cracked tile near the sink, the same spot where her mother used to stand, hands on her hips, scolding her for speaking out of turn. Marin ran her fingers along the counter, tracing invisible grooves left by years of use. The silence felt louder than any argument ever had. The living room came next. The dent in the floor where the old couch had sat was still visible. She remembered the nights she spent there doing homework while her parents fought in low, angry whispers behind closed doors. The wallpaper peeled in one corner, exposing the layers beneath. Just like them, she thought. Always covering the damage instead of fixing it. She moved down the hall. The boards creaked the same way they did when she was a kid sneaking to the kitchen after midnight. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her mind. Family forever, Mary. That's our promise. The words felt like a lie carved into the wood. When she reached her old bedroom, she paused. The room was empty except for sunlight spilling through the blinds, cutting thin lines across the floor. She opened her bag and pulled out the folded note, the one her mother had left after stealing everything. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. We did this for the family. You'll understand someday. She read it once more, her eyes dry, her hands steady. Then she set it on the kitchen counter, struck a match, and touched the flame to the corner of the paper. It curled quickly, darkening, twisting into black ash that drifted upward before falling to the tiles. Marin watched without expression until the last ember died. The smell of burnt paper lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of old lemon polish. For a moment, she stood completely still, listening to the sound of her own breathing. There was no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, just an emptiness that felt clean, like the end of a long storm. She walked to the front door, pausing once more to look back at the bare rooms. The walls held nothing for her now, no warmth, no ghosts worth keeping. Outside, the air was cool, sharp with the promise of rain. She closed the door behind her, slipped the key into the lockbox, and whispered quietly to herself, I'm done. For the first time in her life, the word family didn't hurt. It just didn't mean anything at all. The afternoon sun poured over the highway, a pale gold stretching across miles of gray asphalt. Marin drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely against the open window. The air carried the scent of pine and rain-soaked earth, the sound of the tires humming steady beneath her. It was finally quiet in a way that felt earned. Everything had settled by then. The court orders, the repossessions, the silence that followed. Her parents hadn't spoken since that day, though messages from unknown numbers still appeared every few weeks, short, desperate, ignored. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was the truth about the so-called stolen money. There had never been any real fortune sitting in that joint account. The $2.6 million was nothing but numbers, fabricated figures displayed through a shell company she'd created years earlier. A simple illusion built with the help of a software contact who owed her a favor. The account balance had looked real on paper, legitimate enough for anyone without deep access to financial systems. To her parents, it had looked like treasure. But the transfers they made, the withdrawals, the false authorizations, they weren't just illegal, they triggered audits. Every movement left digital fingerprints, tracing back not to Marin's finances, but to theirs. The investigation uncovered everything they had tried to hide for years: unpaid taxes, off-book cash deals, hidden loans under fake business names. Her trap hadn't been about reclaiming what was hers. It had been about letting them reveal who they truly were when they thought no one was watching. They hadn't stolen her money. They'd stolen their own future. Eleanor had called it a masterpiece of quiet revenge. Marin didn't see it that way. To her, it was symmetry. A lifetime of being used, turned inside out and balanced at last. As she drove, the sun dipped lower, painting the trees in long streaks of amber. She rolled the window down further, letting the wind lift her hair from her shoulders. The sound of the engine mixed with the rush of air, and for a long while, she said nothing at all. Highway 26 stretched ahead, endless and calm. The road curved gently west toward the coast, where the horizon melted into the sea. She thought about the words she'd grown up hearing, family above all, her father's voice, her mother's guilt, all wrapped in that single phrase meant to bind her to their mistakes. Now it felt hollow, a phrase that had lost its weight the moment they betrayed her. A small smile touched her lips as she spoke softly into the wind, almost like a whisper meant only for herself. Family above all, right? The wind carried the words out into the open air. She paused, glancing at the fading sunlight cutting across the windshield. I just made sure they stayed beneath mine. The road stretched forward, quiet and clean, and for the first time, she didn't look back. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away after everything they did, or should I have given them another chance? Tell me your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.